Welcome to Beyond 80 with me, Ben Kay, as we take a look at a fascinating final round of Six Nations Rugby. The weekend started with another unbelievable performance from Italy, the most improved team in the tournament, and Wales losing at home the first time for 21 years that they have not won a single Six Nations match. And then it was over to the Aviva for Ireland chasing that back-to-back Six Nations title, and they didn't disappoint, but boy, did Scotland push them hard. And over in Lyon, the atmosphere was electric and the players lived up to the hype. An unbelievable game, backwards and forwards like two heavyweights slogging it out. Ross Hamilton will be joining me later in the show again as we look at the stats that influenced all the results from throughout the tournament. Let's get stuck into it. So the Aviva Stadium, Ireland need the win to secure the championship, and I don't think anyone expected it to be quite such a tight encounter as it panned out. Scotland had a huge first half and only really suffered from an overthrown line-out that Ireland capitalised on. The moment of the game for me, having hammered away at Scotland's line, Ireland get a penalty under the sticks 65 minutes in, and they back themselves with a tap penalty move. So as we start, Kelleher's over the ball ready to tap and go. He's got Baird and Byrne on his shoulder to latch onto him. So that is the main focus of the Scottish defence. They know they have to stop that initial drive. In behind those three is Jamison Gibson-Park, and the eyes of the players either side will be locked onto him, making sure that he is not an easy little pop pass. Wide left, you have Doris and Conan. They're spreading the defensive line on that side. Van der Fleer is spreading it on the right-hand side. In behind, you have the two props ready to add their weight to drive anything over the line. As the tap's made by Kelleher, Jamison Gibson-Park runs a line out towards Doris and Conan. The ball looks by Kelleher's eyes like it's going to go to Gibson-Park, but he throws a brilliant pass out of the back door to Porter, and all the eyes of the Scottish defenders have been attracted to that initial charge from Kelleher, perhaps the ball to Gibson-Park. So they have to change direction, and that's what compromises them. They rock back onto their heels. They have to go upright to change direction, and they're never going to win that initial collision to stop Porter in his tracks. So Porter gets a little bit of momentum, and then Van der Fleer latches on to drive him towards the line. Beelum comes in behind and absolutely barrels into it, knowing he doesn't have to stay on his feet because of the initial contact that's been made, and he just drives the final part of it over the line. Ireland score, and that was the deciding factor in the result. So perhaps the game didn't pan out as we were all expecting. Ireland had to take the limited opportunities they were given, but they certainly managed that. A big round of applause to Scotland though. They didn't capitulate. The Hugh Jones try was absolutely fantastic. Set up a grandstand finish. In the end, Ireland worthy Six Nations winners. So over to Lyon, a game I was lucky enough to be at, and we saw some wonderful tries. But I think the one I'm going to choose is the one that kicked it all off because it set the scene for both teams having to find some attacking power rather than just relying on the forwards. So as we join the line out, England have a throw 10 metres inside the French half, prime attacking position. So they've brought Elliot Daly off his wing. They brought Marcus Smith up to be part of that initial attack. And then you have Ollie Lawrence and Henry Slade who swap positions, and Tommy Freeman a long way wide on the right, keeping that width for England. When France steal the ball, Le Garrec has to turn and go back, throws a wonderful pass with plenty of width to get into the midfield for France. England, because they've had to transition so quickly from attack to defence, don't have their normal defensive structure at the back of the line out, but they persevere with their new blitz defence system. Tommy Freeman's a mile away from Henry Slade in that attacking position, but Henry Slade carries on going forward. France spot England are coming up fast, so they hold their ground, they don't take any steps forward, and they just pick off England's defenders with sharp hands to get as far away from that turnover point as quickly as possible. Deporter takes out Henry Slade with a lovely stand and deliver pass. Fickou gets through the gap between Slade and Freeman, and then it's just about French pace and picking off those struggling English defenders. Fickou releases Barry, and then Marcus Smith is trying to backtrack and buy time for his cover defence, but they haven't got the pace to match. Eventually, Barry gets to Marcus Smith, holds him long enough. Barry continues to run at Marcus Smith, creating a 2-on-1, shows to pass to Biari, And then as Marcus Smith follows that dummy, he accelerates through. And then despite a really nice recovery from George Ford, who gets back to Barry and half makes the tackle, Elliot Daly and Ben Earl both taken out by a wonderful one-handed left-hand offload inside to the supporting Le Garrec for a French try for the ages. So at that point, I think we all felt England might be in trouble with French so rampant, but England actually, just before half-time, managed to score their first try and then went on to score another 2 unanswered tries. England looked to be in the box seat, made a couple of errors, gifted France a couple of opportunities. The French showed huge resilience at home to come back and get the job done. Joining me now is Ross Hamilton for the Insights by Sage section of the show. Ross, I thought we'd, as it's the end of term, do a school report on the championship as a whole, but each individual team. So if we take this year's Six Nations, I think we can sort of split it into 2 parts, right? It sort of looked like it was going to be a bit of procession in the first couple of weeks, but actually ended up being a really tight tournament.
Yeah, another great one. The Six Nations is always great, and I think it gets better each year, arguably. But this year specifically, and how close all of the games were, perhaps some teams dropping a little bit of their level, other teams raising theirs, but 10 out of the 15 games were won by a margin of 4 points or fewer, just to show how closely fought they were. So Italy had their best ever Six Nations, 2 wins and a draw. Ireland had got to within 1 of England's championship winning record. So some really good numbers in there, some great rugby being played, really great games as always, but a really compelling Six Nations this one.
And I guess as a result, bonus points probably became a bit more important this year. So if we start with each individual team, and obviously Wales at the bottom, not a result that them or their fans would have wanted in this year's Six Nations, but I guess there's quite a few young bodies coming into the Welsh team. What are the key reasons why they're not performing at the level that they should be?
Yeah, the first time in 21 years they didn't win a game. And yes, they're transitioning. Yes, there's young players, but I'm sure they still wouldn't have expected that. So perhaps a few areas that they're lacking. And I had a little look, and the big one for me was their power. Both sides of the ball defensively, but more so in attack. They just struggled to get the momentum, they go forward, that then stresses defences and struggle to score enough after the back of that. So they actually had the second most amount of carries in the competition, and yet they then had the second fewest metres gained over the gain line, second fewest post-contact metres, second fewest in-contact metres. There's a few more. Fewest gain line success, lowest gain line success was 42%, second lowest collision success, second fewest line breaks and second fewest tackle break. So if you're going into games across the whole tournament with those kind of numbers, Italy are the team that's sort of generally below them, but you're just not going to be able to stress defences, and that manufactured in their ruck speed as well. Yeah. They had just 46% of their rucks under 3 seconds, the fewest in the competition again, and when you're getting that lack of speed, you're not disorganising the defence, you're then going to find it really hard to find weak shoulders and holes, which then ties back into the lack of power. They go hand in hand. They just struggled with it massively. They did so in defence as well in terms of the power element. They had the second fewest dominant tackles. As a percentage of all of their tackles, that was actually the fewest. Just 4.5% of all their tackles were dominant. So if you're talking about a young team coming in and transitioning, you know, power has got to be the thing that they might have to address fairly soon.
And I guess in this year's Six Nations, it's been really prevalent. France have a huge pack, a huge bench to bring on with fresh energy as well. England have some big bodies in there. Italy, Ireland, they're all a lot of power in there. And if you can't match that, as you said, the attack's going to suffer. Let's have a look at Italy then. You mentioned, what a performance for them. Bar a ball falling off a tee in an inside stadium. Yeah. They could have been further up the table, but they've made so much improvement.
They have, and for many years we see that, and that sort of improvement. And Italy are willing to play and willing to attack. They just don't quite get over the line to get their wins. The thing for me with Italy, their attack stats aren't fantastic. A lot of them are at the bottom, actually lower than Wales, as I mentioned. Their defence stats also aren't fantastic. So I was trying to find out, where is that progression? Where is that development in their side to win these games and get those results? And for me, it was stark that it was their game management. We see in previous years, and we sort of pull our hairs out when we're watching, kick the ball away when they're in your own 22. Their willingness to play is admirable, but it's so risky because they then get turned over and give away easy tries. They didn't do that this year, and I think that was the big difference. So I had a look at how often they kicked away in their own 22. They kicked the second most of anyone. Only Ireland kicked more, so 48 times they kicked. as a percentage of all of their kicks, that was 36%, again the second highest. So just when they were in those zones, just very willing to kick the ball away if they needed to. Could still play and could still run and show that they did do that, but when they were up against it, get rid of the ball and then reduce that risk that is on them. And so much so against Wales that I had a look at how many rucks they had in their own half. And those are the rucks where you could potentially get really stressed, and if you give away a penalty of some sort, it's kicked over. They only had 33 rucks in their own half. Wales had 66, twice as many. So actually it was Wales who were sort of putting themselves under pressure. And similarly with kicks in their own 22, Wales had 3, Italy had 12. So 4 times as many kicks just to relieve that pressure, get out of that area. And I think that was, for me, that was the difference. Again, attack, defence, not perhaps quite up there as it could be, but if you get it right and get out of your areas and not give every other team easy entries into your 22 and tries, you stand a much better chance of winning.
And I think if you're accurate as well, because the perception is probably that Italy attacked more than ever because they were accurate when they went, but it shows, doesn't it? If you play in the right areas of the field, but then take your opportunities, everyone thinks you're a really attacking side. Let's go to Scotland next then, talking of attacking sides. Someone that we thought would be probably the most attacking-minded side, with Finn Russell at 10 going into this championship, and how they played against England last year at Twickenham, but not necessarily the case.
Yeah, certainly thought that their attack might rival an Ireland's, maybe that to that kind of level, but perhaps didn't factor that way across the whole tournament. Started well against England, yes, but didn't finish off that well. So they actually scored the second fewest tries of the tournament, just 15, again Italy fewer. Their pass to kick ratio was really low. So actually they kicked a little bit more than we might expect and didn't keep the ball in hand. Again, with a Finn Russell, you think he wants to keep the ball in hand and get it to his back. Didn't do that. That then led to their red zone entries being really low because they didn't keep it. They didn't get to the right areas with ball in hand. They might have kicked it away but weren't able to play. So second fewest red zone entries were just 34 across the whole tournament. So yes, when we expected Scotland to come and play, they didn't quite do that. But the big thing for me of why that happened was their discipline. It was really, really quite shocking. Some stark numbers for them, and something I'm sure that they would be looking to address pretty quickly. They conceded the most penalties in the tournament, 57. They actually won the fewest themselves with 27, giving them a -30 differential of penalties. To give that some sort of context, the next worst was England with -1. So they just gave penalties to everybody they played consistently across the game, so that they were always up against it. They couldn't get into the right areas themselves, but more so actually they were put back into their own territory. To the point I looked at, we've got the smart ball tracker, and it tells you how far a penalty was kicked back into your territory. Scotland gave up 970 metres of total territory just from those penalty kicks, so nearly a kilometre, nearly 2 lengths of the pitch in every game. And to give that more context, the average of the rest of the teams conceding penalties and kicks to touch was 621 metres. The best of that was France, who only conceded 460. So Scotland was double that. So if you're just constantly giving away ball in the first place, but inviting teams into your own 22 under that pressure, you're never going to get going.
And then you factor in as well the fact that they weren't getting the benefit from the opposition as much. It's a big swing, absolutely. Let's have a look then at England next. And I guess England came into this tournament under a bit of pressure with what's happened over the last couple of years. Good performance at the World Cup. New coaching staff. How did it all pan out?
Yeah, there was a lot to change potentially, or at least that they tried to. Defence was a big one, which we talked about before, and their attack potentially got going in the latter stages of the tournament. So I'd look at that. But if we start with defence, this blitz defence is very much risk-reward. Yes, they got some benefits of it. There are elements where they can certainly want to work on, and Felix Jones will have a look at. But the benefits were there to see. So that blitz defence got them the most dominant tackles in the competition, 62. It was the highest percentage of all of their tackles with dominant, 10% as well. The big one for me was the amount of carries that they stopped before the gain line. It's 56% of the time they stopped their opposition even getting to the gain line, which is huge. And for context, again, if you do that 25% of the time, you're doing well. So to have it more often than not, you stop your opposition even getting to that point is really impressive. The problem comes when they concede line breaks, which England did a fair amount of times. But it's all about when they concede those line breaks that they led to tries. 44% of the time that England did that, they conceded a try. Only France was worse. And that just comes from the risk of speeding up so much in defence that if you get broken, you can't turn quick enough. and then the opposition can easily pick off the backfield cover. So that's the element that Felix Jones and England are going to want to work on in defence.
Yeah, and I guess in this tournament, when it's new, as a coach, you almost have to commit fully to it and know that you're going to make mistakes. And there were times we've analysed one of the tries that England's conceded against France, and maybe they just went all in where actually the players in the past would have just reacted and defended slightly differently. But you almost need to fully commit to a system and then start to tweak it once it's ingrained in the psyche. Let's talk about their attack then, because I think at the beginning of the tournament, we worried whether England were going to show any signs of attack. Then we saw them start to try and play, but make a lot of mistakes. But by the back end of the tournament, some of the best attacking rugby we've seen it from England for a very long time.
Yeah, huge improvement, and we're talking about that improvement against Ireland and France. The two best teams in the tournament, going in probably still at the end of it, arguably up there in the world. So to develop in that way against those teams was hugely impressive. But yes, some great stats to show how much they did that. Really increased their point scoring across those 2 rounds compared to the first 3. Tries increased quite a lot. They actually had quite a few fewer carries overall per round, but then they made more meters, more line breaks, better gain line success, and had a better red zone efficiency. Now, the thing that I found particularly interesting about those 2 games, the Ireland and France one, when they played Ireland, we thought, and the stats show, that they played a little bit more, wanted to keep the ball in hand. Traditionally, England kicked the ball away a lot, and they didn't do that. Their pass to kick ratio was 7.6. That's really high. It was the highest of their tournament, and they had the fewest kicks in play of their own tournament, 21. However, when they played France, they actually reverted to type a little bit. They had a really low pass to kick ratio, just 2.4 compared to 7.6 in the previous round, and they kicked the most of their tournament, 31. The thing with that is, and we've questioning in the past, is that relentless kicking. I don't think anybody, and certainly I, have any problem with the kick style being in a modern game. Is if you do something with it once you get the ball. Ireland kick a lot, France kick a lot, New Zealand kick a lot, but it's when they get the ball back, they can do something with it, and that was the difference for England. That when they got into the right areas, they could actually attack, and they then proved to score some really nice tries.
So again, a little bit like we were talking about with Italy, everyone's saying that Italy are playing the most attacking rugby we've seen for a long time. They're not, they're just being more accurate when they get those opportunities.
That's it, and for England, it was when they got into the right areas, they then could implement all of that attacking style that we've seen, and it was so good, to the point that in the first 4 rounds, they scored 2 tries from first phase, or a strike or launch as we call it these days. In the 5th round, they scored 2 just in that game. So it's getting into the right areas in the first place, then being able to convert, and that being a big thing for England that they really struggled with. Over the tournament as a whole still, they had the lowest red zone efficiency across anybody, just 1.94 points per entry. Against France in round 5, that was 4 points per entry. Only 2 teams in the whole competition have had a better efficiency than that. So you think that is the difference for England, is they got into the right areas, then they were able to strike, and then they converted and scored their points.
So I guess for that new coaching group, the big message going forward will be, we now know the system, it's just about being accurate both in attack and defence. So moving on to France, very, very close game at the end there to secure that second spot. But I think there's probably a bit of overall disappointment from France. We know that they lost their talisman, Antoine Dupont, to the Sevens programme. But I think off the back of the World Cup, people were expecting a bit more of a positive response.
Yeah, they finished second in the tournament, but you probably think that is a disappointing result. They certainly dropped a level, I think, below Ireland. And there was a few things of interest from that. Their attack stats, again, weren't fantastic. Their defence stats weren't fantastic. Not bad either, of course. They finished second. But it was just trying to work out what the difference was for them and why they may have dropped that level. So I actually had a look at the tournament as a whole, and the table finished quite split, I think, with the top 3 and the bottom 3. And I had a look at the area that is always most important, is red zone and taking your chances, as we mentioned, with England, and the top 3 did significantly better than the bottom 3, both in attack and defence. So the average red zone entries for the top 3 were 10 entries per game. For the bottom 3 in the tournament, 6.3. Big difference per game again, so that does add up across all of their games. And on the flip side of that, the top 3 let in entries to their own 22 much less frequently, 7.1 on average to 9.2 for the bottom 3. So that's just such a big area that showed why the table was split why it was. And then if we link that to France, whilst they got into the right areas quite well, they didn't convert and they didn't score. And that's not something we've seen from France for a number of years. Antoine Dupont especially, pulling strings and finding the right passes all the time. So when France did get into the 22, they had the second lowest red zone efficiency. Only England were lower. So France's was 2.26 points per entry. And they also actually struggled in defence at stopping their opposition from scoring even when they got in there. And that was actually the worst. So 2.97 points conceded per entry into their 22 was worst of anybody.
I guess from their point of view, it's more about taking those opportunities and that will get them back to the level. They're still creating those opportunities. They're just not the same side in actually following through when they're there.
I think we saw that they've still got the threats and they're still making those line breaks. Most line breaks of the tournament from France, Damien Penaud topped the individual list of that as well. So they've got the threats, but yes, it was just that final element on occasions they were missing.
Okay, to the champion side then. No real surprises. I don't think that Ireland are the champion side. I think from week one, it almost looked like it was going to be a procession. Having said that, the last couple of rounds were probably their toughest games. How did those teams stop Ireland playing?
We thought that they were just going to walk to the title. They obviously lost to England, had a really strong, fierce game against Scotland, and in the last game especially, they felt in control throughout. They probably just lacked a little bit of accuracy. But if we do look at the whole tournament as a whole, they were the best side. I think they still won the championship, of course. But it was just some of their stats across every game. So they might have been focused a little bit, weighted a little bit more heavily in the earlier stages than the latter. But barring a last-minute drop goal from Marcus Smith, they win a Grand Slam, a back-to-back one. So I think we can still say comfortably they were the best team. And I've just got some stats, and we have hundreds of stats that we go through, some really bit more important ones. But to be at the top of any of those lists is quite impressive to have one or two. To be at the top of so many attacking stats that Ireland are, it is unseen before, to have that level of dominance. And again, maybe France dropped off, who might have competed with them. Scotland didn't attack quite so well. But still, credit where it's due to Ireland. They had so many. And I'll take you through some of them here. There's quite a few. But the most points scored in the competition, most tries. They had the most carries. They had the most running meters. They had the most meters gained over the gain line. The most post-contact meters, the most in-contact meters, the most carries over the gain line, most tacklers committed to their carries, most line breaks, highest possession time, highest territory time. That gave them the fastest average ruck speed and the most red zone entries.
Fairly compelling.
Compelling. I mean, it took me a while to say that, but the fact that they are just got so many of those that are just so dominant across all the teams just gave them everything they needed, was enough in the end with obviously a loss versus England, but enough to get them the championship.
I think if you think about all those stats and think about watching Ireland play as well, the impressive thing is the variation and the way they can find different ways to score. A lot of teams have a USP where they're very good at certain things, be that a line-out drive or the forwards play when they get into the red zone. But Ireland can do everything right in attack.
They can do everything, and we said this the last time, that everything looks fairly easy for them because they're so well drilled. And even the try that you're going to look at with the sort of the set launch play from a tap that Porter goes over, it's so smart. I think their coaching team is so smart, constantly developing as well. As soon as you stay stationary, you actually go back compared to the other teams. So to continue to do this off of the back of a World Cup that perhaps was disappointing, to then come into this and be first in every one of these categories just shows their variation in their play, their ability to adapt and to be able to overcome anything that's thrown at them.
Oh, Ross, fantastic insight as always. Lovely to see the tournament as a whole rather than just taking those individual rounds. You really get that overview of consistency being the main thing when you're playing in a Six Nations. Thank you so much for joining us on Beyond 80 for this series, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much for having me.
Over to Cardiff then, and for me, probably Italy's greatest ever Six Nations performance. They were so dominant in that hostile atmosphere at the Principality Stadium. They set up a strong foundation early on, that Ioane try backing up a very, very strong forward display leading up to it. But the game-defining moment for me was the Pani try, showing how far Italy's attack has come on, their ability to go hard at the line, hold defenders, delay the pass to the last possible second, so that defensive line cannot recover. So let's take a look at that try. It starts with really good line-out ball. Nicotera runs round as the half-back player and feeds Menoncello, who takes a crucial extra couple of steps towards the Welsh defensive line. In doing so, he holds 4 Welsh shirts and feeds the ball back to Stephen Varney in the backfield. Varney then accentuates the damage done by Menoncello by throwing a huge wide pass to Brett. Italy now have a diamond formation running at the outside Welsh back. Rex goes hard to the line himself, again holds two more defenders. George North has to plant his feet because of the threat of Lamoureux. North manages to get off Lamoureux, but as he commits to the next tackle on Garbisi, Ioane straightens just as Dyer starts to go outside, worrying about Pani in the wing slot. Once Ioane's in behind Dyer, he throws the ball to Pani, who uses his pace to get round Tommy Raffel, who's scrambling back. And then just as Josh Adams comes across at full tilt, worried about being beaten to the corner because of the pace of Pani, Josh Adams, worried he's not going to get there, overcommits, shows a little bit too much to Pani, and he just uses a strong right-footed step to get inside the flailing Welsh defence, bounce off Tompkins with a fend, and slide in for one of Italy's greatest ever Six Nations tries. So Italy had raced out to an 18-0 lead. They carried on, one of their strongest ever performances. Wales did show some resilience and come back, but I just think this performance from Italy show how far they've come on and how much more belief they have in their own ability. Thanks everyone for watching throughout this series of Beyond 80. We hope you've enjoyed it.